Hello, nonprofit leaders. I'm Sarah Olivieri, your host, and this podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders, make a bigger impact with insights, tips, and lessons learned from nonprofit leaders and experts. Having been an executive director, a board member, and now a consultant and coach, I truly understand the challenges you face. And that's why I'm here. I'm all about working smarter, not harder, so you can make a bigger impact without the burnout. And so is our sponsor, DonorBox. DonorBox isn't just a suite of helpful fundraising tools, it's a partner that helps you raise more money and supports you in retaining your donors. I love their forward-thinking approach. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. And don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Nonprofit Leadership newsletter, where you'll get bite-sized, actionable tips just for nonprofit leaders like you, delivered weekly to your inbox. Sign up at inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. My guest for this episode is Barb Clapp, who is not just a leader, but a force for transformational change. She is a successful entrepreneur and nationally recognized business leader. Barb has always been committed to giving a voice to the voiceless. What makes her truly inspirational is how she draws on her own experience of overcoming adversity to empower others by providing the resources, support, and solutions they need to overcome their own challenges and achieve lasting success. As CEO of the nonprofit Dwyer Workforce Development, Barb is disrupting the traditional approach to solving the healthcare workforce crisis and creating a new paradigm for healthcare workforce training. Welcome, Barb. It's such a pleasure to have you. Before we dive into things around nonprofits and what you're doing and your incredible experience, would you just share a little bit about yourself personally so we can get to know you as a whole person?
Sure. I am definitely a huge risk taker, and I love to start things from the ground up. And this nonprofit is the third business I've started of some sort. And one of the things I always try to do is what my sign says behind me, which is always, always, always do the thing you're most afraid to do. And that's been my motto as I've lived my life, because I grew up very shy and also had difficult circumstances and never put myself out there until I decided I was going to put myself out there. And that has been a game changer for me, because if you try to do something you're afraid to do, the rewards are unbelievable.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of dive into that a little actually, because so often, like a theme that's been emerging for me this week is when folks are afraid to step outside their comfort zone, when they're afraid to do something that's hard or they avoid it, it really hinders their ability to achieve the things they want to achieve. So I'd just love you to share a little more, like, what are your tips for doing that, for facing your fears? How do you do it?
Well, it's different for everybody else. I really get anxious when I think about doing something that I am afraid to do or know I should do, or I'm challenged to do it. But then I think to myself, will you be disappointed in yourself if you don't do it? And there have been choices I've made where I didn't do it, and I went back and I was disappointed in myself. And for me, thinking that I did live up to what I wanted myself to be has been a great motivator for me. I think everyone has to find their own motivator. But I've also believed my whole life that change brings opportunity. And I have two daughters who have had times in their lives where they thought they should do something, but they were afraid to do it or felt challenged by doing it. And, I've always said to them, change brings opportunity, and you will find that if you make this change, it will net rewards.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and in that, doing something you're afraid to do really strikes me with your words that it's usually a change, right? It's usually doing something different, something new. And when you said, like, you get an anxiety about it, I'm not religious, but I went to Quaker high school and Quaker summer camp. And so I learned to do Quaker meeting for worship. And there's this, Quakers are called Quakers because of this quaking thing that happens during meeting for worship. Or if you're not religious, people just call it silent meeting. And literally, not every time, but when you sit essentially meditating or thinking for 45 minutes or an hour, sometimes something important bubbles up, something that feels scary, and you get that anxiety like, oh, this is important. And you feel like that. To me, that quaking is that anxiety. It's like, but what you learn in Quaker meeting is that when that happens, the message from Quakers is you're supposed to stand up and share it with the room and just put it out there. And I learned early on from doing that even though I was scared and it felt really important, so my voice was shaky, the there's a relief or a release from that anxiety when you just stand up and put it out there and it leaves your body. And then you're along for, I mean, in Quaker meeting, you've just said it. But I think in the rest of life, once you put it out there, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm on the ride.
It's a beautiful thing. People do it in therapy,
Yeah.
right? And then they feel better that they did it. My husband actually went to Quaker school his whole life and goes to Quaker meetings. And so I'm really familiar with what you're talking about. And I think sharing, even in a Quaker funeral, when people get up and share about the person that they've lost or that they know or knew, there is a anxiety around that and a sadness, but it's also a relief when you get to say how you feel about that person. So I think just understanding also that anxiety gives you power in many ways
Yeah.
as well, because it's telling you a story about either what you want to be or who you are
Yeah.
now. And once you realize that, that gives you a lot of
Yeah.
power.
Yeah. That's funny that your story, because I rarely share about my Quaker upbringing, and that you brought that out, and so, I don't meet so many people who have a shared Quaker experience outside of alumni from my school and my summer camp. So I want to ask you just if you can start off by telling us a little bit about what is Dwyer Workforce Development? What is it that you're doing there? And because we're talking to other leaders, like give us a sense of the size, like how many employees, roughly how big is your budget, those kinds of things to right size what we hear.
Okay. So I started Dwyer Workforce Development on June 1st of 2021, sorry, 2021. I sold my company, my prior company that I had for 18 years, and my earnout aligned with the pandemic starting. And I had sold it because I wanted to run a nonprofit. And in the introduction, you said that I like to give the voice to the voiceless. So I've spent my entire life, when I was old enough, to try to give the voice to the voices, whether it's voiceless, whether it's animals or people. And I did it in my volunteer world. And then when I had my company, it was a communications company. And I did it there with education, healthcare, not for profit. And those not for profits really resonated with me. So when I decided to sell that company and run a not for profit, there were no jobs. And one of my clients came to me in 21 and said, what are you going to do now that the pandemic's opening up a little bit? And I said, I want to run a nonprofit. He is a very successful businessman, Jack Dwyer. And he is also extraordinarily philanthropic. And he said, well, listen, I want to help people who lack opportunity and I want to fix the healthcare staffing crisis. And I said, okay. So I started this from nothing in June of 21. And that meant everything, getting the 501(c)(3) status, building the team to today. And I got some good funding in February of 22. And from February of 22 to now, we train people to be certified nursing assistants. We give them a path to any kind of future healthcare career. And I knew the differentiators had to be, if you have the same barriers to success after you're trained in a job, you're not going to be successful because they just don't go away. So I knew I wanted to implement comprehensive wraparound services and person-centered case management. And that has been the big differentiator for us. I also, my funding source is it- I acquired a for-profit business during all of this and turned it into a nonprofit business. So it's a huge number of skilled nursing facilities. And the money that they throw off after deal covenants, I rebranded those as nonprofits too, and they're doing extraordinarily well. And the money they throw off also funds the workforce development program. So we have trained to date from zero in 22. We have trained 12,000 certified nursing assistants. Many of them are on the path to nursing school, patient care tech, other healthcare careers. And we are now in 7 states.
Amazing.
So
Big
we
round of applause. And I want to highlight for our listeners a few things you said that are really important, or I think this. But so you had a clear mission, right? Two problems that you wanted to solve simultaneously. So that was clarity of the problem you're trying to solve. And then you use this word differentiator, which, is common in people who do for-profit marketing, which is part of that research piece, right? Or just, if you're a marketing professional, rather than nonprofit spaces like to use the communications and not full on marketing. And I think that's, a disservice to the space because full on marketing always includes market research when done well, right? And identifying how you have something unique and special. So it's not just you have a specific mission, some specific problem to solve. You have a unique, special way of doing it. So you have those two pieces. Those are so foundational to succeeding. And then you've kind of leveraged the dynamics of the space, being able to turn some for-profits into nonprofits to add a funding piece to it. It's all, it reminds me long before I was involved in leading nonprofits. I never forget though, I knew I had started a school. I had founded a school. So I guess I was into it and I chartered a school. And it was a lot of work just to figure out how to charter a school in New York State because it doesn't go through the entity of New York State that incorporates every other business. So almost nobody knew how to charter a school. You have to go through the New York State Board of Regents, and there was like one guy in a teeny office in Albany who like you file special paperwork with. But that's a tangent. And then I met this other person who just basically took over a defunct school or a going out of business school and took their charter and then built his new school and skipped all this work that I'd gone through. And I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant repurposing, right? The charitable purpose was basically the same. One was just kind of a general school and one was more focused on kids with special needs. But I see you kind of using the resources around rather than trying to recreate everything from scratch.
I hired my first 8 hires I knew already. So I didn't create that from scratch. And the people that I brought on were people that I knew had the same values as me and had the same willingness. Everybody, his job description had a bullet that said, et cetera. And they were willing to accept the et cetera because we were starting from
Yeah.
scratch. And these were people that I knew would be risk takers like I am. And that was a big lift when we started because they came in and they were willing to do 9 jobs. And they knew that they were going to do 9 jobs, not just their one job, right? And that enabled us to grow very quickly.
Yeah. I love that. I love the risk taker piece. And I think, whenever I think about organizations who are in a growth mode, I'm always like, you need more leadership minded, ready to own outcomes, AKA risk takers on your team in order to grow. If you want to stabilize, maybe not so many, many of those. Are you familiar with the Colby A assessment?
I'm not,
Well,
but
for
I'm sure
folks who aren't, Colby A assessment assesses how people solve problems across 4 domains. And one of the domains is how they solve problems related to risk. And so you can literally, if you're looking for risk takers and you don't have friends who you already know are, you can use this assessment and find out very accurately, if they're like comfortable taking risks and will use taking risks as a tool for solving problems. That's like at the far end of the spectrum. And at the opposite end is they avoid taking risks. And then there's the middle who's like, comfortable navigating. So I think like I completely agree with you. And it's helpful to have a tool where you can just be like, oh, screen me for the risk takers, right? And balance your team out in that way.
Well, people will tell you that they're willing to take a risk and then they really aren't because it's
So
scary
true.
and it's
Yeah.
hard. And so, I would clarify, no, look, I'm not kidding you. This is a big jump in and take risk job. And, for a long time they used the phrase we're building the plane while we're
Yeah.
flying it. And, Barb is never wants to like slow down. But, I the people that I hired in the beginning knew who I was. So they're like, yeah, you're right. So, get on board or don't stay. And honestly, we haven't really had any turnover.
Amazing. Yeah. Hiring, really hiring great fit team members is so powerful. Like not having that turnover. The turnover costs so much
It hurts
financially, time wise. That's key. I can tell you, yeah, go ahead.
culture. It hurts
Yeah.
culture too.
Yes. Yeah.
It impacts your
Yeah.
teammates.
Speaking of that, because I've had a lot of clients recently who are needing to let go of teammates.
Oh,
And talk
yeah.
about something that's
That's
scary.
important.
I bet you have some experience in this, knowing how clearly you know how badly a bad fit team member can affect things. What advice do you have for folks who know it's true, know what they need to do, but are just afraid?
Keeping a poor team member on the team is so destructive. And if they're not performing well, they're also probably not happy and it's not a fit for them. So I always think to myself, I say to my directors, fire fast, like you do it correctly, make sure you're documenting and make sure that you're doing your 30, 60, 90-day reviews. But fire fast. It's not fair to the person that is not performing well, to keep them because they know they're not. Secretly, they know they're not. And I also feel that way. We have a lot of partners. We have employer partners, we have training partners, we have nonprofit partners, and we have donor partners. And we have requirements of all of our partners for one reason or
Yeah.
another. And, you know, they have to sign an MOU. And if they're not adhering to the standards of the MOU, I also say, get rid of them. And now we're in a point where every year we're assessing if the relationship is productive. And if it isn't, again, it's over.
Yeah. I love that answer because I agree that it's really like firing a team member who you employ. It's really an act of compassion.
Well,
And it is much kinder to take on the burden of initiating the conversation as a leader than it is to kind of wait for them to suffer through a long time and quit or leave in some more uncomfortable way than it needs to be.
it's true. And going back to the 30, 60, 90, assessments, I think, I had a few directors that felt uncomfortable telling people that they were not performing to standard. And again, that's not fair because you can't have it sneak up on people either. You really have to be, you can be kind about it, but you have to be strong about helping people understand what they're not meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you mentioned too, like it's true in partners and even donors. I've certainly seen organizations who are like, oh, they had a bad fit donor, just like a bad fit team member. And I'm always like, let them go because they're not they're not your donor who's going to marry you and stay with you forever. Tell me more
Right.
about how
Right.
build and ensure you have good partnerships with your donors?
Our donors are, to your point, there are some not good fits for donors. And, we're trying, since we're starting from scratch, we didn't have any base, and that's difficult. But slowly but surely, we're building individual donors. That's our priority because most organizations get majority of their money from their
Yeah.
individual donors. So we're doing a focus on that. We've also built a really cool program around individual donors, and basically, our trainees are we call them Dwyer scholars, and they are encouraged to upskill to increase their financial future and wealth for their families. And, we've set up a program where people can, if it's important to them to see somebody go to nursing school, they can fund a year or two of nursing school. So that's one kind of silo. And then, we give them, if it really matters to them, childcare that somebody so we have a childcare silo, and that has really been successful in getting our donors to be willing to give. So we've built it that way. We have a big breakfast every year called Care Force Collective, and we bring together people and we tell the stories because when you hear the stories from people who never heard yes their entire lives and they get to yes and then they see success, there's no
Yeah.
stopping them because there's a little difference between people who've had means when they get to a certain place and our Dwyer scholars when they get to a certain place. They just want to be successful and build a future for their families. And so when we tell their stories, our donors are really, really taken by it. And we serve some of the hardest to serve, which makes the stories even more compelling. Be it people that are homeless and, they come from incredible, horrible backgrounds. So we also build it around our team. A lot of our team members have a lived experience. At this point, I have 64 team members, which I didn't tell you in the last question. And they're over our states where where we're located. And they have very compelling stories as well. One of my team members been homeless 3 times in her young life. And knowing that we're doing inside of Dwyer Workforce Development, what we're doing outside makes donors interested. And then, of course, healthcare right now is
Yep.
hot. There are 700,000 jobs that opened in the past year, and the economy is faltering with other jobs that we would have been down 500,000. And so to donors, knowing that they're funding people who might take care of them in the future because the healthcare staffing crisis is catastrophic is compelling for a donor as well.
Yeah.
And of course, foundations and other sources
So
of
I'm
money.
hearing, and I heard this earlier, but didn't highlight when you were talking about how, how when I was saying like you were leveraging things that are already out there, I also heard you building an ecosystem. And I hear you kind of expanding on that even more, right? You're practicing what you preach, internally as well as externally. And then your donors are, buying into that concept. And it's also an ecosystem where your donors might actually benefit directly or indirectly, right? Everybody who takes a job somewhere else means somebody else is going to take a job somewhere else, right? So one of your folks could get a job, in one state, and that could make somebody else take the job in my state and have them be there when I needed care. It's supporting the whole system. We all need health care at some point. And I love to hear, like, I think that's an important lesson for everybody out there to be thinking about rather than doing everything individually as a silo. How can you make your activities an ecosystem that build upon each other and amplify all your other activities?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, if it's very compelling. Look, if you don't care about people that lack opportunity, you do care that you're not going to have anybody to take care of you when you get
Yeah.
older or take care of your parents and so we look at our mission also and we try to capitalize on one part of our mission that will interest
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. I think that's one of the powers of like a double cause nonprofit. It's kind of that's not a term people use, but I use it in my head when I meet a nonprofit like yours. I had a client years ago, Second Chance Foods, and they have a double mission of climate change and food insecurity, where they are rescuing food both from farms and grocery stores and turning it into nutritious pre-cooked meals that serve food insecure families. And they also had that, right? If you care about people who need food, or if you care about the environment, because they have all this great statistics, like when you rescue food, you actually reduce like carbon emissions by a huge amount. And so there's this huge environmental impact. So they kind of have two pools of potential donors, those who care about the environment and those who care about people. Of course, there's crossover, people who care about both, but some people are much more attuned to one or the other. So I think that's really,
Yeah.
really great. And I think it's important for, other nonprofits to be thinking about, not that you should force a double cause if it's not a good fit, but to think about perhaps it is a good fit and that can amplify what you're doing even more.
Yes, I agree with you. It's just really thinking about who your target is. Who's your target and what's the message to
Yeah.
them and how are you going to deliver it and what is going to create return?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I'm sure you have lots of things that you have brought from your successful for profit leadership career to your nonprofits. What are some of the leadership practices or systems that you use and that you think are really helpful for folks?
So, what I had seen in the nonprofits that I volunteered for and also that I for my clients was often the it's not just endemic to nonprofits, it's also other businesses. People do not understand what their product is. They don't understand because in the end, we all have a product, you know? A nonprofit has a product and we have a
Yep.
buyer. That principle of product buyer. And nonprofits don't think that way. They don't understand really what their product is. They don't have a clear picture of what it is they're doing, why it makes a difference, and how they're going to tell a story. And that is all about helping people get their arms around that idea. I think that is a important concept that that I brought to this nonprofit. I also had business-based values, actual real business-based values instead of heart-based. Not instead of, that's the wrong word. In addition to
Yeah.
heart-based. You a lot of people I see that are in nonprofit work because they care deeply about it, but you have to look at your work with a business
Yeah.
lens and think, like it is about raising money. So it's like making money so that you can continue to do your mission and make it operate. And just the same thing with creating a budget, making sure you have a budget, making sure that you stick to your budget, making sure you have a strategic plan, making sure you have clear goals every year and that everyone in your organization understands what those
Yep.
goals are, have clear job descriptions for your team. I think that a lot of times when people run things from a heart place, it seems like the right thing to do, and it is. You can do both, but you have to bring that business lens to your nonprofit work, and those were the kinds of things that I brought here when I started the
Yeah.
nonprofit.
I think that's so important. And at some point in trying to grow a nonprofit, even if you come at it just from a heart space, you hit the realization some folks take longer than others, that if you really care, you also have to have the money to fuel growth. You have to have efficiency or you're not going to grow, and The scale piece is when we apply efficiency to growth, right? And we start to be able to do even more with our resources, per dollar, per resource, we can get an even larger result. But just to grow without scaling, right? You can grow a certain amount with heart alone, but you're gonna be stalled, and if you really, really care, it's gonna get frustrating, and for those people out there just, thinking, "I really, really care and I'm frustrated," I think, listen to Barb here because she's got a lot of tips about how to really scale that, how to grow that by managing your resources carefully, and the concept of leverage, which I think gets talked about in the for-profit space a lot, and it's usually tied to financial leverage. But I think nonprofits need to be thinking about leverage. I think even more because for the most part, I think our work is more important. I think the work that you're doing is the work you're doing helping nonprofits with marketing, that is wrapped into nonprofit work to me. But right, compared to folks who are, selling shoes, right? It is way more important helping, the folks that you're helping and building our healthcare workforce. This is really life or death work.
Yeah, I think it's also, again, the sales mindset, bringing, that old sales idea of understanding your features, your advantages, your benefits. And the thing that used to make me really crazy with my clients that were nonprofits were ones that I've tried to get in front just because I knew the right people, get them in front of somebody to tell their story. And then I'd say to them, don't forget to make the ask. Like when you get in front of this person, do not forget to give them an
Yeah.
ask because they're not going to guess it. And I've seen so many people in the nonprofit world be unwilling to make that
Yeah.
ask. And I think that's a really important thing to do your research ahead of time, understand what this person can give, and then ask them
Yeah.
to give it. Like
Yeah.
ask.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It's scary, the letting people go, but I also think of it, it's like an act of compassion for them. They're not gonna know. And it's also, I like to just tell people it's like expecting your friend to show up at your party without an invitation.
Mhm.
Right? No, of course you should send your friend an invitation to your party. Of course you should invite your donor to make a gift, right? Don't expect them to have the, balls to push through and give you an uninvited gift. That's
Right.
uncomfortable. And so, yeah, it might feel uncomfortable a little to make that ask. But man, if we don't, we're leaving our donor in the lurch so much, I think.
Yeah, I had one of them say to me, I got a person in front of a person that could have given them a
Yeah.
lot of money. And he said, that was a waste of my time because I kept waiting for the person from the nonprofit to ask me what what they wanted me to
Yeah.
do. And they did do it. And he said, I would have given them
Yeah.
$20,000. And he said,
They didn't
ask
ask
for
for
it.
it. Yeah, great example. I've heard examples similar where a donor gave, 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever it was, and then later the nonprofit kind of came back with a report and they were actually underfunded. They really needed 50 and the donor's like, "Why didn't you ask me for 50? Because I wanted you to succeed. You let me basically give you not enough, and, I'm annoyed about that, right? Because I could have given you 50. You didn't need to be in this position. You should have asked me for what you really needed." And if they can't give it, they're not gonna feel, obligated to give you money they can't give. But they will be upset if you under ask as well, your true need.
And give it to
Yeah,
somebody else.
absolutely, right?
And
I could have given you 50 then, but now I can't because I gave it to somebody else, and I would have rather given it to you, but it's too late now. And in a way, then you
that's true.
wasted the 5 I did give you because you didn't ask me for the 50 that I could have given you and would have made the difference.
Which is a good point. That part about the you wasted the
Yeah.
5 because you can't execute your mission because you didn't ask me to give you enough. then you kind of did waste that
Yeah.
5,000 I gave you.
Yeah. So true. This has been an amazing conversation. We're over time. I could keep asking you questions. It was probably for a long time. But to wrap up, for those people who do want more, who should be reaching out to you? What's the best way to do that and keep in touch and follow your work?
Well, certainly we're always open to supporting other nonprofits. We like to spread mission impact that way. So other nonprofits should reach out to us. We also do take a lot of people that the nonprofits serve into our program for Dwyer Workforce Development and them in workforce development. And then, any kinds of just spread the word about us. I mean, I really truly believe the more people that know about Dwyer Workforce Development, the more return we'll get. And if you know somebody that lacks opportunity and would like to have a workforce job, send them to us as well on our website. Yeah, and our website it's a mouthful, but it's www.dwyer, DWYER, workforce dev, DEV.org.
Wonderful. And we'll have those links in the show notes as well.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Barb, so much for being here and sharing your wisdom. And thank you out there for listening and everything you do to make our communities better. I have an ask for you listening, which is to rate and review this podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps the algorithm deliver it to more people who can benefit. And if you can, share this episode or another episode you have found helpful with a friend or colleague who could benefit. And until next time, I wish you all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.